brand health today is top line tomorrow. Warren Buffett had this famous phrase around this saying, it's only when the tide goes out that we can see who's swimming naked. There's a lot of people swimming naked at the moment.
Hi, everyone. This is Jim Stengel, and welcome to episode 1 of the Brand Builders Playbook. Hey, I have another show called the CMO Podcast where I've been doing it for 6.5 years, talking to senior marketing people about their life, their passions, their work, their teams. This one's going to be different. And what I hear a lot now from the people I talk to in the branding marketing space is things are really changing. Every day is different. Chaos, uncertainty, we hear it all. We were talking about it ad nauseum. But the implications of that for how we build brands, I don't think we've unpacked enough. So our goal for this show, the Brand Builders Playbook, and it's going to be 8 episodes, we want to leave you in the audience with a playbook that is built for 2025 to help you build your brand in these really challenging times. So I think if we can give you guidelines, a playbook, and 8 episodes, each with a different theme and each one sequential, so that you can, I hope, leave this series with more confidence that you are bringing it all to build your brand and help it reach its potential. So anyway, I can't wait to do this. I think it's so timely. The 2 people I'm about to introduce to you, I love working with them. This is going to be a great threesome. We have some other people who are going to come in and out of the show. Every show will have a special guest. Today's is Chris Burggraeve, which we'll talk a lot more about in a few minutes. That's me. I'm going to turn it over to one of my co-hosts, Ryan Barker, who I've known for many years and have a tremendous amount of affection and respect for. Ryan, great to join you for the show.
Thanks, Jim. Excited to be doing this. I'm Ryan Barker. I am a CEO and founder of BERA.ai. I've spent my career helping CMOs justify their contribution to the bottom line by bridging the gap between marketing and finance. And I totally agree, Jim. There's so much uncertainty going on in this world. Brand is sort of taking a back seat. Yet, with all the advancements of data and technology and frameworks, how do you navigate that? It could be overwhelming. And so this is a no BS playbook where we can give practical advice, bringing stewards of the industry.
And Lindsey, over to you.
Hey guys, I am Lindsey Wehking. I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Nonfiction Research. And Nonfiction Research specializes in both deeply immersive and also deeply quantitative research into audiences and brands. And we have done a lot of the, audience work that laid a lot of the brand building foundations for some of our biggest brands, Google, Disney, Frito-Lay. And so it's, we're on the ground floor of some of what we'll talk about during this series.
Well, I'm super excited to be working with both of you in this series. And I think it's helpful to talk about our history together, right? Ryan, I met you maybe 8 years ago when your company was young and was super inspired by the mission of your company and the new capability you're bringing to the marketplace. Lindsey, you're a newer friend. I met you, maybe a year and a half ago when I asked you to be on the CMO podcast. Then we ended up doing a presentation together at the 4A Stratfest, and I fell in love with your company, the team, your mission. So I just think the 3 of us, we share a lot of values. We enjoy being together. You 2 are newer friends. I'm sort of the glue that brought us together. But I am so hopeful that what we're about to do in this series is going to be fun and useful and meaningful for all the brand builders out there who are seeking a new playbook for the times we're in to build their brand. Awesome. Now let's get into it. So before we jump into this, it's our episode 1. How are you both feeling about this? I mean, are you a little bit nervous, a little bit excited, a little bit apprehensive? Lindsey, I know you're on sabbatical. You're running around the country researching all kinds of bizarre things. So how are you feeling about it?
I'm so excited. I feel like I haven't talked to people in our industry for a month and a half. So I'm a little bit untamed right now.
Perfect.
And I'm thrilled, Jim. This is a topic that is so long overdue. I think the importance of brand is stronger now more than ever, especially with all the uncertainty going on in the world.
So what's your hope, both of you, for, we're doing several episodes for this series. Everyone will have a different theme. Today, we're starting with a very fundamental one, which we'll get to in a minute. But what's your hope as you step back from this that our listeners will gain from the entirety of this series when they walk away from it? And I assume most of the listeners, you never know, but most of them will be people who are running brands at all levels from junior to senior. What's your hope that they will get from this? And Ryan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, my hope is that CMOs and other brand builders understand in a linear fashion on how to measure, manage, and maximize brand in a way that it's used as a strategic asset, not an overlooked expense that a lot of Wall Street and finance individuals think of.
Lindsey, my guess is your answer is going to be different.
I mean, I hope this, I think it can be so hard to carry the conviction and belief in the value of brand through tumultuous times, and so I really hope, I think we can inspire people to have that conviction and then give them the tools to translate and have those hard conversations where, they need to defend value and figure out how to measure and translate to other parts of the organization.
I mean, this topic is evergreen, right? We could have done the show 40 years ago and it would be relevant, but things are really crazy in 2025. And I think everyone I talk to is trying to figure out the playbook. What's changed? What's different? How should I approach my work? How should I approach my teams? What's the role of brand? So I think our timing on this is spot on. And and we have lots of different voices coming in throughout this series. And I'm so looking forward to, I hope, producing something that's really going to help people in what they're wrestling with right now in what's the playbook to grow their business and grow their brand. We're going to open every episode. We're going to have a little bit of a tradition here. So because this is the Brand Builders Playbook, we're going to start with what do each one of us see right now going on in the market that is kind of inspiring us. Some brand that's using a playbook, which we think is really interesting, surprising, and this could be a success, could be a failure, could be something that we like, something that we don't like. So I'm going to role model that to get us started for this one, but we'll do this in every episode. And the playbook that I think is really interesting now is the Chili's playbook. The bar and grill. Just some financial background on this. The stock price of this company is up 5x in 3 years. It's up 2.5x in the last 12 months. Okay. And we're dealing with some, interesting market conditions. And the reason I like the playbook is the CEO's been there about 3 years, the CMO about the same time. They're part of a larger leadership team. They came in and said, it's not that complicated running a restaurant, right? Great service, great food, great ambiance, clean restrooms, fun. So let's do that and do that really well. And they focused on the most popular menu items and they doubled down on those. So focus, simplification, clarity, and then, so they're doing all that really well. They're being rewarded with higher traffic. But the real, I think, clincher is they noticed on social media, so they were in touch, watching what's going on, that people were holding up their receipts after going through the drive-through lane in fast food chains like McDonald's. And they were holding up like $42 I just spent in the McDonald's drive-through. So Chili's basically took that and said, we need to expand our TAM, our total market. We're not competing just with casual restaurant consumers. We're competing for everyone in fast food. So they sort of took McDonald's as their foil and said, for about the same price as McDonald's, you can come into Chili's and sit down, have great service, have $6 margaritas, have endless chips, and have a great burger and fries. And their traffic just skyrocketed. So the playbook, reframe your market, think about what you're really good at, provide tremendous value, and, be in touch with social and be agile enough that you can pivot when you're hearing something from customers. So it's a playbook that's really working. They're really growing. The morale in the company's all-time high. So fabulous playbook. Sorry, I've been on and on, but it's worth it. So that's Ryan, what's the playbook you're loving these days?
Yeah, I've been really impressed with Liquid IV. I think they play in a world of a sea of sameness. And while many different brands in their space communicate and over-communicate on functional benefits like hydration, they're doubling down on the emotional connection and consistently at every touch point and every channel. And I think a big part of that is having to prove that emotional connection is a way to build differentiation when perhaps from a functional standpoint, you might be at parity. I also think a lot of companies have been over-relying on performance marketing on promotions. And here's a company that's really focusing on emotion over promotion to win the day and they're not taking shortcuts. So I've been very impressed with them.
Their CMO's ex-P&G, by the way. So great young CMO. Lindsey, you're on sabbatical. You're doing all kinds of strange things. You're planting a garden, which you were talking about before we started recording. So who knows what you're going to say here. What playbook are you admiring now?
Oh, so a couple months ago, a friend of mine, like a childhood friend, said to me, they were like, remember when we were young and our parents forced us to shop at Aldi and it was like embarrassing? Like, I think Aldi's cool now. And I was like, is Aldi cool now? And then I started looking around and I was like, Aldi is cool now. And I have become obsessed with, I mean, they're exploding. They're like planning to open, I think, 225 stores in the US in 2025. And I think what's so genius about it is like, when I was a kid, like honestly in the US, I feel like the product it was cheap, but like their fresh goods weren't that great. They've like really upped the quality of their fresh food. Their food's great. Their products are great, but they've also like started to build a brand around a store that has no brands, which I think is genius. And they've like leaned into the fun of like frugality, which I think is like, we tend to think about price and these discount places as so functional, but I think they've really found this like emotional angle. And they have this very infamous, it's called the Aldi Finds aisle. And it's like random products. Like it can be anything from like a dress to like a blazer to like a piece of furniture to like a basket at this like grocery store, and it's constantly changing. And it's all like super discounted, great deal of stuff. And fans have taken to call it the Aldi, the Isle of Shame, because they end up spending so much money on these random things they find in Aldi, but it's worn like a badge of honor and people will like show off the things they have found. It's got like a Facebook group with like millions of followers. And so they've just managed to have so much fun. They did this campaign I think a couple of years ago. They created like a generic brand version of Adidas called Aldidas. And so I just feel like they're having so much fun with that like mindset around frugality and creating this like fandom around a brand with no brands.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Lindsey, because we pulled some BERA data on Aldi. What you're seeing here is what we call a DNA chart, where we can see the high associations for the brand versus a competitive set. And specifically, cool, one of the things you called out, is in fact one of the primary impactful drivers for the Aldi brand.
And they've evolved, right? We lived in Germany in the late 90s and we shopped in Aldi in Germany. They were not having fun back then. So give them credit, right? They've been in touch. They've evolved the brand, and everyone wants a little bit of a smile in their life, and they're certainly doing that, in addition to everything else they do well. The first episode of this series is the right topic, right? And it's such a fundamental question. Why would we be doing a story or a series on the Brand Builders Playbook if it wasn't important to build a brand? There wasn't conviction in building a brand. And I don't say that lightly, because that's not the case in many companies, right? There is not that conviction to build one. I remember years ago, after I left P&G, Toyota invited me over to Japan to speak to their board about why it's important to build a brand. And this is a pretty good brand, right? But they were asking philosophical, why should we spend resources in building our brand if we make great products and that people like our products? So it is an age-old question. And so we're starting there. That's going to be the topic. And our guest will reflect that, because it's someone who's committed his life to the importance and value of building a brand. So Lindsey, I want to start with you. When did you discover conviction? Because you're working in this industry when you're off sabbatical. When did you discover your aha moment or your conviction that building a brand is actually really important in business and I guess in life at large? When was that moment in your life?
I think sometime in my mid 20s, I just started in the industry, and this idea of brand is such an abstract concept in our industry, and we get really heady about it, right? We have brand frameworks and brand purpose statements, and we really we do a lot of these abstract exercises to find the one word that our brand is going to stand for. And I think that makes it all this abstract thing. But I think when you step away and you think about yourself as like a person in the world, and like what things are you drawn to, and what things do you remember, and what things do you like mean something to you, you start to realize that everything that is very important to you symbolizes something. And I was just talking, this is like a very recent exercise, but like I was just talking to a friend about just Charlie XCX and Brat Summer last year. And I think what's so amazing about that album, and something that like artists, I think, sometimes get more easily than marketers in this day and age, because I think they don't overthink it, is like, it's not just about the music, it's about the world that you build. And it's about what that world stands for. And it's about creating a world that people want to be a part of. And I think when you think about the things that you love as just a human, not as a marketer, you find that idea of there is a symbolic world that exists in the places that you want to go, and the groups you participate in, and the things you buy, and the music you listen to. And all of that is essentially brand. Like, we can define brand a million different ways, but I think about it as like a symbolic world that you want to be a part of. And that's what makes Brat more than just a music album. That's what made Nike more than just a shoe. And it's not, there's other aspects of marketing that are so important, and the machine doesn't work without it. But brand is ultimately what creates the meaning and desire. And if you don't have that, then what's the draw? And I think looking at my own life and looking at the things that I loved, that's where I found that, I think, truth.
Well, meaning and desire, which leads to financial impact, which obviously we'll get to a bit later. Ryan, I want to flip it to you. You obviously have conviction that brand is important because you started a company to really measure, optimize, and prove the financial impact of brand. But I want you to reflect a bit, as Lindsey just did. When did you develop that conviction? You've been in this industry a while before you started your own firm. You were WPP. So when did that aha moment happen for you?
Yeah, well, prior to WPP and even Omnicom, my background was in economics and finance. And so here I am in the agency world, and I was blown away by the power of creative. And I'm a huge believer in creative. However, I started seeing people getting awards of really funny commercials or cute babies and puppies, but the financials of the company are tanking. And I was like, why are we celebrating this? And there's creative that has financial impact that doesn't. And then that's really where the conviction became to understand behavioral economics on, is there a way to do both? How do we understand that brand is an asset, not an expense, that does that? And so from there, I just dove in, all things brand, wanting to understand the economics, the research, analytics, and how it comes together. But it started in my early 20s.
That's a good segue to bring in our featured guest for the week, Chris Burggraeve. But before we do that, Lindsey, we're going to give you a bit of a break. You can go grab a cup of your favorite branded coffee or whatever you're drinking. So Lindsey, enjoy your little break. And Chris, can you come into our conversation? My good friend, I won't say old friend, he's very young at heart, my good friend, Chris Burggraeve. Welcome to our show. Now, listen, I can't imagine, Chris, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit, make you blush. You are the perfect guest to start this series. I've known you for a long time. We met at P&G. You went to Coca-Cola, first global CMO of AB InBev. And since you've left, I think you have been a leading voice, if not the leading voice, in this topic of the importance of brand, in finance and marketing and in companies at large. In fact, you have a couple books on the topic. So I want to thank you for joining us. It's great to see your face. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And Ryan, you two are going to probably nerd out here a little bit. My role in the next 15 or 20 minutes is to prevent you two from getting too geeky. But I want to toss the ball over to you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Geek number one, to start this conversation with Chris on the importance of brand building as a financial activity and as a financial asset.
Yeah. So this is great. Chris, I've read your books as well. So excited to jump in. So while the topic is what's the importance of brand, I'd like to start with you is, when did you realize that brand is more than an expense, that it's an asset that needs to be measured with the same finesse and science as any other financial KPI? When did that dawn to you?
Well, when you're a young brand manager in P&G, they keep telling you that you're the general manager of the brand. I mean, at least at that time, that's what they told us. And it resonated with me. Now, when you work on bigger brands like the Pampers, which was my first brand, or the big detergents, you're in that communication framework. But then at some point in time, I was thrown into the new category of drinks, where P&G started to compete with the likes of Coca-Cola. And all of a sudden, I had to put my hands on the business of drinks, a brand called Punica, a German brand that was acquired, like Sunny Delight equivalent. And all of it, and that was not easy. That was a completely different animal in the business, a way for P&G to drive growth, but with different dynamics. And we needed to learn not just how to make great advertising on Punica, we were great on that, but how to compete on a business model. how to think about distribution, how to think about all the aspects and facets on a brand. So this was the first time that I met, probably earlier than anticipated, the need to think holistically, financially, business-wise around the brand, and that the brand is a means to an end and not just, as a brand manager, you want to win Cannes Awards.
I think it's great. While we're probably going to jump into many of the war stories of how to quantify brand and the financial benefits, what was the number one financial benefit of brand that really opened your eyes beyond potentially just sales?
To me, a brand is, very simply, it's a means to an end, if financially speaking. If you're, I sit on boards, you look at it through the lens of a balance sheet and building intangible assets. In the end, a brand it's all about growth, profit, and your risk profile. I think it's a way to drive growth with customer acquisition and retention. It's a way to drive profit with pricing power. It's a way to de-risk your profile and famous alphas and betas and create some more surprises. So de-risk, reduce your beta in financial terms, and increase your alpha. So now, Jim, I'm geeking out.
Yeah, you are. Could you explain that to my 7-year-old granddaughter or my 2-year-old granddaughter?
But every company, what drives boards? What do people like about brands? What do brands do? They help you create predictable cash flows in the future. It's all about cash flow, repeatable, predictable cash flows. And so that's the growth component, de-risking those cash flows. The more you have a brand that people love, repeat buy, which whatever the rhythm of your business is, the better your risk profile, the more predictable your risk profile comes. Technically, your beta, which is your variance versus the market, you go to market average in terms of risk. And the chance that you outperform, which is the surprise alpha that every Wall Street guy thinks about, how can I overperform versus my expectations? That's alpha. You can do that with brands. Brands can truly surprise and outperform.
Now, Chris, I talked a minute ago about I left P&G and Toyota invited me over to talk about why is this concept of brand important. Now, if I had you with me at that time and I had a skeptical board in front of me that thinks if they just make great products and have a great sales organization, they can win, how would you have handled that presentation to a skeptical board about the concept of brand?
You can start from the base principle, right? Is Toyota selling cars or is Toyota selling Toyota? There's a difference between a cola and a Coca-Cola, between a diaper and a Pampers, between a beer and a Stella Artois. There's a difference between a car and a commodity and a brand called Toyota, for which you are in principle willing to pay more for. So ultimately, back to those cash flows, I would speak Wall Street and finance and direct the whole discussion around, gentlemen and ladies, if you are interested in building the strongest intangible asset as part of your fiduciary duty as a board, you have an obligation. If you choose to be in the branded business, you have an obligation to, because you can also choose to be in the commodity business. If you make a strategic choice to be in the branded good business and not compete on pure operational excellence, then you have a duty to infuse that name Toyota with all the functional and emotional reasons possible for people to pay more for your product. It adds to the product. If you go back to the fundamentals of the 4 Ps, it starts with a great product, always. I absolutely am convinced of the need for product superiority, but it's the start. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition of the whole equation.
You wrote a few books on this. What's been the reaction to those books in thinking about brand as a financial asset?
I think it is exponentially increasing. And you know why it's increasing? Because of the world we live in. We are being hit by meteors at the moment. There was no reason for people to think too much about the bridge between marketing and finance. So academia calls this the managerial marketing finance gap. It has been around for 60 years. And if you think back to our zero interest rate policy from the last decades, for 40 years, we had no inflation. Nobody worried about the P of price. Now, all of a sudden, people are waking up and saying, my margin is under pressure. How do I maintain or strengthen that margin as a CEO in these environments? And the only way you can do that is on a branded goods business is to raise your price, but justify that price increase in the mind of the consumer. That means willingness to pay must be built. And my old adage, which I would use for Toyota, which I did use at ABI, which I use at every meeting I have, is brand health today is top line tomorrow. Warren Buffett had this famous phrase around this saying, it's only when the tide goes out that we can see who's swimming naked. There's a lot of people swimming naked at the moment.
Totally agree with you, Chris. And one of the key things we talk a lot about at BERA.ai is how to measure brand love in a way that it reduces price sensitivity. I'm curious because in your tenure, you've been in good times and bads. When finance or private equity wants to cut marketing investment, even if you proved brand is a valuable asset, how did you have that conversation? What did you do to fight back?
It's a very good question, and it's not an easy answer. My honest answer is you have three choices as a marketeer. You love it. You go along with the management, whatever the decision is, with the cuts, this and that. You leave it or you change it. Essentially, you freeze, you flight or fight. And I'm not judging. The three options are valuable. Or have their reason for existing, and they exist for a lot of people. And they all depend on your choice as a marketeer and depend on the ownership of your company. I would say look at who owns your company to answer that question. If your company is committed to the long term, with a board, a family company, a board that thinks in decades, that builds brands over time, you have a chance to commit to the short and long term and appeal to this idea of you are compromising cash flows in the future. They will understand this. This is discussions that I should imagine happen in Procter & Gamble's board each time. Yet, if you are a private equity board and your horizon is, and again, I don't want to vilify private equity, but if your horizon is 5 or 10 years or less, and your mantra is, I need to sell this puppy with a two-year time frame and optimize for sale, then that is your mantra as a C-suite and therefore as a marketer. And you can then choose to say, oh, here is my lesbianette 60-40 and I need to invest X and Y. People will just not listen to you because the strategic objective of the company is 2 years horizon, optimize for 2 years. So it's, as a marketer, if you apply some math to it, it's linear programming under constraints. How do I optimize given the framework under which I operate?
So you're a better man than me. You love it, leave it, or change it with no judgment. I think I have too much judgment. I think with today's technology and the ability to measure brand in real time down to the zip code, whether you're a public or private company, brand is definitively an asset, and we can quantify its short and long-term contribution, as you were saying. And I like how you're talking about, depending on what the objective is, that would be the optimization. But too many folks believe brand's all about long-term, and therefore when it's tough times, brand, let's slice it, not quantifying properly that there is an absolute short-term contribution that could be measured today and tweaked depending on your objectives.
And Ryan, I think you're right. But then we go back to the more short-term, the sales activation component, the so-called, who invented that name, performance marketing, and everything else. I think you can drive, and brands can help drive. But essentially, what you're doing is you're milking whatever is the existing brand equity and trying to squeeze that lemon extremely fast and get the benefit from it. It's possible. But I give you an example of where that plays out. Remember Sprite, right? Coke, Fanta, Sprite. I was head of Europe for Coke for marketing and responsible for the soft drink portfolio. So for the core of the business. And then there is the other part of the business. Essentially, people wanted to take money away from soft drinks to reinvest in what was perceived to be the higher other new drinks. And I sympathized for it because I also worked for those before. Yet I said, okay, you're going to come. They said, we won't come after the money from Coke. We won't come after the money from Fanta. We'll take the money from Sprite. And here's an argument with the CFO. Well, Chris, if we stop advertising for Sprite for a year, what would really happen to brand equity? The honest answer is very little. Because you've been building it for 50 years. So for 50 years, there's been investment. You can actually monetize this, or you can take money away for a year. Then what happens the second year? Now the sales guys come back and say, where's the Sprite plan? And is anything happening because our retailers are asking about the Sprite plan? And you start to have some delistings here and there because nothing's really happening. Because the second year CFO came back, see, I told you, the equity hasn't really changed. Why don't we take some more Sprite money to fund all these other things. And by the third year, Sprite was kicked out of a buckle of retailers. And then 5 years later, somebody has to relaunch Sprite at a cost 10 times what it would have cost to maintain Sprite for 5 years. But the company sees this as a bigger portfolio play. And so even in the best of companies, these mistakes get made all the time. And they are lessons for me to say, every one of those brands is your baby, and it has consequences, what you do. And the consequence always plays out in pricing power on that particular brand. You're going to give it up. You're going to swim naked. It's very simple.
Now, Ryan, you have formed a company that's been looking at this issue for 8 years now, something like this?
10.
So you have a lot of data. You're measuring brands around the world every week. So Chris dropped a quote. I think it was from Warren Buffett: "Brand health today, revenue tomorrow." Something like that.
That's mine.
That's your quote.
Okay. When the tide goes out, you can see who's swimming naked.
That's more Warren Buffett. Your quote is "Brand health today, revenue tomorrow."
Correct.
Okay, super. So Ryan, I'd like you to react to that. Because we're talking about Brand Builders Playbook. Why brand is important. That's our first episode. You're kind of looking at this more than almost anyone on the planet. So what have you learned in your company with your amazing analysis, your amazing data about brand health today, revenue tomorrow?
Yeah, it resonates big time. So let me answer first with the statement that I think there are two negative forces that have caused problems for brand building and for CMO. Number one is short-termism, where there is an over-reliance for Wall Street to hit short-term sales objectives at the expense of brand building for tomorrow. And then two, the over-reliance of performance marketing, which everyone loves because it's measurable, whereas brand not so easy, also at the expense of brand building. And so it's caused folks to put brand in the long-term bucket. As I was mentioning, we have the ability today with high-resolution data that you should be measuring in real time with the same granularity and focus as you do with sales to quantify brand's contribution to short and long term. And to Chris's point, depending on that objective. If I double click on that, performance marketing today has a lot of technology that allows you to measure the ROI. And what folks have been doing is the more that's driving short-term sales, they keep spending more. Well, what's happened is there's a doom loop, something that we just published with Warwick and some other colleagues called the multiplier effect, that we can prove that you're going to reach a point pretty fast of diminishing returns that you're going to have to spend, Jim, 2 to 3 times the amount just to have the same success you had with performance. Well, guess what? Our friend brand, when coupled with performance marketing, not only unlocks a multiplier effect, but what we found is across 200 sectors, brands plus performance marketing on average has a 90% higher ROI, but it even gets more gloom. If you just do performance marketing and underperforming brand, you are shortchanging yourself by negative 40% ROI. And so we can bridge that gap today so that brand isn't this cute, fuzzy emotional connection, but rather an asset that has quantifiable short and long-term contribution.
So you're challenging the paradigm that brand marketing can build short-term sales. And I guess the inverse of that is performance marketing can probably also build brand depending on how it's done. So am I stating that right? Is that what your data shows?
Absolutely. They're two sides of the same coin. Typically, performance marketing is put in one part of the house while marketing brand building is on the other. And their left hand and the right hand are not talking together, not understanding there's absolutely a cause and effect. When folks in performance marketing use the same brand brief as the brand builders, two things we can quantify. One, it improves the conversion rate at every stage of the funnel. Two, and you get a higher ROI per dollar spend across both brand building and performance marketing. And it's been siloed when it doesn't need to be. They have different objectives. And also what's unfortunate, Jim, is they're getting compensated differently as opposed to being aligned, which leads me to one of the things I was going to ask Chris is, in your career, what's the role of the CEO from a brand building, and what's the role of compensation? And does that go to marketing only, or who else should be compensated on brand?
Very good question. And incentives play an incredible role. Let me illustrate this with my personal experience at ABI when I joined, or it was InBev and then AB InBev. Think of InBev and AB InBev as a very, very strong athlete with two strong legs, finance and operation, and a very well-developed arm, left muscle in sales. When I came in, the question was, we want you to build the fourth muscle, or we nicknamed it the fourth muscle. So not at the expense of the others, but add a fourth muscle, make us from this sales-driven machine a consumer, brand-centric, people-centric, sales-driven machine. So what we did in steps was essentially, this was a very disparate group. So we created, in a nutshell, one language around the world. So one set of definitions, one AB InBev way of marketing. So a playbook that was recognized around the world and everybody was following it in the same way. So things could be comparable. We tested the theory. And the theory of, this is very important because I'm dealing with all my colleagues are engineers with MBAs, self-declared super rational people. And the only thing they would listen to is the data. So we did a Six Sigma type. We luckily had a lot of customer databases and a lot of preference data, consumer tracking data, which you could correlate with pricing. And we showed that brand health today is top line tomorrow. I could prove it of why we were showing that. And across the world, the CEO took that on, and that mantra became his mantra, not mine, his. What he then did is, for the first time in his history, that year, he took in his incentives brand dashboard, data that were about preference, which was never done before. And he cascaded it to all of his zone presidents, which they weren't very happy with. But what it did force is alignment between everybody. And then we supported it with training. We went to various top universities. A lot of the top 200 of the company got trained in everything to create that one alignment, that brand health today is top line tomorrow. And every zone president, every country manager was linked to each other. And those incentive alignment made all the difference. If you then look at, this was in 2009, and 10, and you look at how the so-called focus brands, so out of the hundreds of brands, the 25, 30 brands we really drove around the world, they massively outperformed the rest of the portfolio and drove the entire company. So you cannot underestimate to your point, the power of incentive structures.
Jim, I'm curious for you, because you had a very long tenure at P&G. What's the role of a CMO to get a CEO to understand brand? Who owns brand?
Well, I think everybody in the company has to own it, and I think it has to be built into the, as Chris says, the performance systems, whatever that company might be. But that has to start with a conviction that building a brand is important. And I think the CMO does play an enormously large role in that. And they need to be the ones, if there is a gap in knowledge, if there's a gap in data, if there's a reason that there is doubt in the company that the concept we're talking about is important, that is totally on the CMO to.
This is where you fight. This is my
address that. This is where you fight. Yep.
This is where you fight. You want to be the evangelist. You want to educate. But it starts with, and again, I wrote this ultimate CMO guide for scarce board seats. That was one. We're actually about to complete the next guide, which is the ultimate CMO guide to beat budget hell. Essentially, how to sell your dream budget to senior leadership in this crazy world. And the answer to that, in my experience over the last years and decades, is pricing power. You talk about the outcome, because price is undeniable. The CFO, everybody can touch it. It's a tangible asset. And you invest in tangible capex. So we also use the language they love. Besides tangible capex, we invest in tangible capex to drive price and pricing power dynamically on the P&L, which is language the CFO understands, language the CEO understands, language the board understands.
Yeah, Chris, right on. And I think the other thing about this, Ryan, I think if there's conviction at the top, I mean, there's a reason Procter's 185 years old. They do have a belief, and it's based on everything Chris is talking about. It's revenue tomorrow, it's pricing flexibility, it's cost of capital, which I know you talk about, Chris. P&G doesn't hire at the highest rates for employees because the brand of P&G is so strong. People will work there at lower money than they could get somewhere else. I joined that company not because of the salary offer, but because I wanted to
Called
join the
willingness to
company.
sell.
Yes, absolutely.
Felix Oberholzer-Gies value stick. There is the WTP, willingness to pay, that we typically try to influence as a marketeer. But strong brands, and again, another part of making the case for your Toyota board is a willingness to sell. Essentially, margin is a component of the pricing that you get as close as possible to willingness to pay. And on the bottom part, trying to get your ingredients, your people, whatever it is, at the most attractive price for your company. Strong brands will attract people at market rates that are below those who don't. You will be able to have better terms with your customers and suppliers. You will have higher, your cost of capital will be lower because your equity will be higher, your cost of debt, because your default risk is lower, your interest rates will be lower. All of these are benefits that the CFO can take to the bank and the C-suite can take to the bank. So the case for strong brands has a top line component, as Felix Oberholzer-Gies is a professor in Harvard that wrote Simply Better Strategy. He had this idea of the value stick. And I think it opened my eyes as well to, traditionally you look at the top part, but the bottom part is equally compelling for a CFO.
So, Chris, we're going to have to give Ryan the last word with you, but we're going to have to release you in a moment or two here. If you could sum up for our listeners this idea of why brand is important, and they had 2 minutes with their CEO and CFO to kind of re-engage on this topic about why brand is important, what's your advice to that person?
I would tell them, ask your CEO the very simple question. Do we have pricing power on our brand or not? And the answer is red, orange, or green. The data do not lie once you do the exercise. And pricing power is your ability to raise the price at or above your inflation without losing demand. That's Buffett's definition again. Do we have it or don't we have it? If this is a CEO with a long-term view, he cannot be immune for that argument. If it is a CEO with, okay, I'm here just for the 1 or 2 years, you have your two other options to consider.
Ryan, anything for Chris before we let him go?
I share Chris's conviction on the importance of equity to reduce price sensitivity, profitability. So let me put a second very important lesson. I think the ability to quantify brands' short and long-term contribution to any KPI that a company has, sales, share, profit, TSR, is absolutely feasible today. And to help them understand, if I were to grow equity by 1 point, how long do I have to wait? What is the lag effect? What is the elasticity? If I grow 1 point, how much do sales and share go up? And what's the investment required to grow 1 point of equity? I think if you start with those components, you can go into a boardroom, activist investor, shareholders, and from a fact-based perspective, definitively define brand's contribution and why it's important. Today's topic.
Jim, I think what Ryan highlights is that the why for brands, which is sustainable pricing power and purpose-driven pricing power, the why is unchanged. The what, brand health, etc., is unchanged. It's the who and particularly the how that is there's so much more available to us right now within your playbook. Because if I go back to the concept of playbook, a playbook is essentially how you win, and how you win every year again. And I think Ryan's point is there is so much more available in the how playbook today that can help you impact that outcome of pricing power.
Well, we're going to have a lot more episodes about the how. Actually, that's what this series is going to be about. But why don't we have marketers more rapidly adopting all the latest technology, models that we have available in the market? Is it just that they don't have time? They don't have curiosity?
And, if you ask me, it's I think people are overworked, but it's at the same time, you lose yourself quickly in a subcomponent of the how. Many marketers allow themselves to be restricted to the P of promotion, not to the 4 Ps thinking. And so once you get bogged down in that 1 P around communication or the subparts of communication, you lose sight of the bigger picture. And you only start running like a hamster in that very seductive 4th P of promotion. Whereas if you take a step back and you look at, you start from price down, you will reorient your priorities, your language. You need to how you communicate, how you use your time.
I love that, Chris. We have a lot of CMOs that wrestle with this challenge that come to us. And I think there's just a plethora of different KPIs and channels and proliferation of media that's just made it really scary. I think the reality is to demystify all this. It just starts with, what are the metrics that matter, that are predictive of what we have? Everything else is noise. And if we don't know yet what are the metrics that matter, that's step one to demystify what could be very intimidating in today's world. Chris, thank you so much for being on this podcast. I share your religion. I continue to learn from you, and looking forward to your new playbook that's coming out as well. I think it doesn't matter the sector or the country that any CMO or brand builder works in. A lot of the principles that you talk about are so relevant today in navigating this world of uncertainty. So really appreciate you shedding your wisdom and war stories with us. Thanks so much.
Ryan, thanks. It was an honor and a pleasure to be here, and let's keep the good fight going.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Well, that was Chris Burggraeve, Lindsey. I don't know if you've met him before or talked with him before. So he's full of passion and energy about the concept of brand as a financial asset. So you've enjoyed your coffee. You've been listening into this interesting dialogue. It got a little bit nerdy here and there. So what was your take on what you just heard?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was fantastic. I think Chris has such a, he's just able to reduce the complexity to such like startling simplicity. And, you know, even that quote at the beginning, like, what are you really selling? Are you selling a car? Are you selling Toyota? And if we're selling Toyota, like, it forces you to confront the value of brand. And I also really liked, you know, he obviously has so much experience, like putting this stuff into practice. And, you know, that observation he made of just how we kind of constantly have to keep pulling our heads above and out of the silo of not only the day-to-day activity, but what part of the marketing organization we're in, and almost needing like more ritualistic ways to keep kind of going back to what is really, you know, what is that one thing we're trying to do, because it's so easy for that all to fall apart in the day-to-day. And then I think the other thing that he said that I really felt, especially, you know, we do market research at Nonfiction. And so people are often coming to us when they are trying to figure out brand and trying to refigure out brands. And, you know, he made that point that, you know, when you disinvest from brand for a period of time, the cost of coming back can be so much higher. And we see that a lot. You know, we've had a lot of clients come to us after long periods of kind of pulling away from brand. Hanes is one that I remember very clearly. And, you know, it can be done, but the mountain of work you have to redo to go back to, you know, those brand building principles and reinvesting in a very like audience centric, you know, brand foundation is huge. And if you can stop that amnesia or that pain or that cycle, I feel like we get in this cycle of forgetting, like this, we have like brand amnesia in our industry. We're like, we're all in it. And then like, things get a little hard or stuff happens and we forget and we just redo that cycle over and over again. And I thought that was a really brilliant point.
Did Chris say anything that made you rethink your playbook when you work with clients?
I mean, I think he was so, you know, I think I talk a lot in like feeling language, and I think his like simplicity of how to talk about the way brand translate to like financial value. I think I just take for granted that I assume we all like just kind of naturally or instinctually know those things. But I think, you know, him talking about the two levers, like not only does it give you a vehicle for demanding more from a price perspective, but also, what did he call the other things? The willingness to
pay a premium.
Yeah. And the other like the collection of things like employees will be more likely to work for you and less price sensitive, and creates all these price efficiencies other places. I just thought those were a really clear binary of kind of the two levers that brand can really drive financially. You're
a new host here with Ryan, and you know me pretty well. What did you learn about Ryan in this discussion?
Ryan's such a delightful nerd. And I just think his belief in Ryan kept really going back to this point around, a lot of us buy into the long-term benefit of brand, but it's when the conversations become short-term that we seem to really get this amnesia. And I really appreciated that, like, there is data that shows short-term value, and there's just in the world experience, you know, like culture moves so quickly these days, and cycles and product cycles move so quickly. And I think Ryan had a steadfast unwillingness to compromise on the short-term value of brand too, and I believe him.
Now, we started the episode by saying we're going to talk about the playbook that we admire from other brands, and we did that. I'd like us to start a tradition as we end this episode with the one thing from the discussion we just had that after listening to this episode that you would recommend our listeners go away and do some work on, to work with their team on, to change maybe something they're doing. What's the one thing you would recommend to our listeners after this great discussion? Ryan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris and I share a lot of the same religion. I think it's starting with understating whatever the business objective is, short or long term, KPI agnostic. You need to prove brand's contribution to that metric: sales, share, profit, TSR. And if you can do that, then you better show that brand is everyone's responsibility and not something to compromise in tough times.
Good. Lindsey, how about yourself?
Yeah, and I think pulling that in, I think, he was so clear about, I think that you all were so clear around how, this doesn't work in a silo. Everyone has to buy in. And I think being able to bring the team together to understand, like, one, do we really believe in brand? And if not everyone's there yet, using a lot of the, I think tools Chris gave us to begin to show that argument. And then once we all believe in brand, now how are we going to pull that through all of our different silos and pieces of the organization and give people missions? Like every department, every team, every person should have, like, what's their mission related to the brand. And I think that's a way to make it, fun. Like, you're on a mission after all. And I think making it fun, because brand is what makes things fun and what makes the job fun. And I think you can bring that funness into the financial argument.
I think it would be also fun if they get rewarded for that mission too.
There you go.
Then it'd be really fun.
I think for me, one thing would be to really understand your pricing flexibility. And are you on the same page on that with your team? Because we're in a time, obviously, of inflation, uncertainty, and a lot of companies will be taking pricing in the next year. So how resilient is your brand to pricing changes and pricing flexibility versus other choices people have? So I think that's a really rich dialogue that, as Chris was very clear, that's the power of a brand. And I certainly saw this at P&G. Most of our brands were premium priced, and most of them earned it, and most of them had high value ratings while being premium priced. That's where you want to be, right? And that's a combination of lots of things: product benefits, product superiority, packaging, communication, everything. But that's what a brand is, right? It's just not your ads, just not your shelf. It's everything.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, that was fun. What do you think? What do you think, Lindsey, Ryan? How did we do? First episode, first team together. What do you think?
I think it was fantastic. Chris has no shortage of war stories. Lindsey brings a lot of energy to the conversation and doesn't speak in KPIs and vernaculars, just make it super simple for folks to get. And I think both are important in these worlds.
Well, Lindsey, you're not going to join us for every show, but we hope you're here as much as you possibly can. I think you add a real richness to this discussion. So thanks for being part of it. Next week, stay tuned for part 2 of the Brand Builders Playbook. This one was the right way to start. Why is brand important? And next week, we're going to talk about the role of love and why that's important to build a brand. Where is love in your playbook? So, Lindsey, you should be with us for that.
Now you're speaking my language.
All right. That's a wrap. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.